Hi, I'm Chuck Fletcher.
Hi, my name is Alain, Vigneault, coach of the Flyers.
Hey, I'm Travis Konechny.
Hey, this is Jeremy Roenick.
Hi, this is Travis Sanheim.
Hi, I'm Paul Holmgren.
Hey, I'm Scott Lawton.
Hi, I'm Joel Farabee.
Hi, this is Bob Clark.
And you're listening to
Snow the Goalie.
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 Oh, I guess yes. Welcome into Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Vigneault Podcast, the Panthers Podcast, the only Flyers podcast. There's a lot. There's a lot to talk about. The Flyers have lost 7 straight games. We are at odds as a podcast trio. We have lots to break down, lots to talk about, but I guess I'd be remiss if we didn't first introduce the two lovely men. And I know Ant seems to be a little bit jelly that I've recently started leading off by introducing Bundy. So go right ahead. I feel like I need to make it up. So first of all, of course,
I respect my elders. It's okay.
Wow. First up, of course, is Chris Tarian. Find him on Twitter at CTarian6. How you doing, fella?
That would be me. Look at Ant scarfing a little late night scarf down after the old Flyer Ranger game tonight.
And then now that he's got his mouth full, Anthony Sanfilippo. How you doing, pal?
I'm delightful right now.
This is going to be great when it goes up on the YouTube channel over on the Crossing Broad YouTube. Of course,
now listen, I got to explain. Why am I eating at 10 o'clock at night? Maria came home. Normally, I don't eat at this hour because I'll be up all night with acid reflux. But she brought home a bowl of fresh burrata and prosciutto. How can I put this in the fridge and wait till tomorrow? I mean, you got to eat it right away.
You got to eat it. You got to
right
get
away.
Absolutely.
No matter how much it kills me in 4 hours, 5 hours, it's delicious. So taking a couple bites, I won't eat the whole show.
All right. Well,
yes,
I appreciate it.
Right, maybe I will.
Listen, I don't believe. What is that? Pink lemonade? Please tell me you're drinking pink lemonade.
I am, and a little pink lemonade to wash it down. So
as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you're listening to this on the podcast feed, by the way, we have to give a shout out to a few people who I'll try to pull this up here throughout the course of the show. When you get close to the end of the year, obviously Spotify does their thing where they do the yearly wrap up. And we had a few people who reached out today saying that we ended up being their number one most listened to podcast this year, which, we'll obviously get into the Flyers and there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but we've talked about this a lot over the course of the last few years that Anthony and I have done the show, and Bundy, of course, with you here now. We greatly appreciate the listeners out there who continue to come back week in and week out. The listener base continues to grow, which is great. One of the people was Craddy Shack at Craddock Colin, who said, "Is this a lot? Top podcast was Snow the Goalie, a Flyers podcast. Listened to just under 2,300 minutes of Snow the Goalie. That's a lot. That's a lot of Snow the Goalie, guys.
it's a lot of minutes.
It's a lot of minutes. Even at 2x speed, that's a lot of minutes.
That's like more minutes. That's like more minutes than you played in a season, right, Bundy? 2,300.
So. Say 20 times 80. I mean, you can only get it. Say I got that. It would be 1,600 minutes.
Yeah, so there you go.
That guy's we got to get him a shirt or something. This top fan of the year. Good stuff.
I think you're right. You're right. There was somebody else who did too. I can't find them in the mentions right now. I'll look for it by the end of the show. And if I don't, feel free to send a DM my way and tell me that I'm a dolt for not being able to find it. But okay. As I was saying, over on YouTube, the Crossing Broad YouTube channel, youtube.com/crossingbroad, you can find episodes of this show. Almost every episode since the Bundy era has started has gone up onto YouTube. And there's also obviously like a bunch of past episodes that we've done, past interviews that we've done with some of your favorite personalities on the team, around the team, executives, coaches, etc. So you can always go check that out. Now that we got that out of the way, the Flyers have lost 7 straight games. Chuck Fletcher met with the media yesterday, which we'll get into in a bit. But your immediate reaction to the Flyers going up to New York and losing to a team that took a very different strategy in terms of rebuilding their franchise, and one that I would argue has a much brighter looking future, at least for the next few years, in the New York Rangers. And let's start with you, because I know you've been a little bit more positive about this team in our text thread. How do you react to what we just saw?
Well, we'll get into what you're saying. I've been more positive. We'll get into that as we get later into this conversation. I thought that the Flyers were going to play a good game tonight. Coming in, I kind of got the impression that they were going to come out and play a really hard game. And at times they did. I thought that they competed, they battled, the power play looked, I know it didn't score. It's so hard to sit there and say, well, you know, they got a lot of shots. I think that they ended up getting like 14 or 15 shots on goal during the power play. Shesterkin was just really good on the power play portion of the game. And I think, Russ, you even tweeted out about that, about just how good it looked. I mean, but Shesterkin was really the answer. The problem with the Flyers,
the 5 minute.
Yeah, the 5 minute. Yeah,
it was a little bit tongue in cheek there, but like when they got into the 3rd minute of the power play, all of a sudden things started to look like they were starting to click. Unfortunately for the Flyers, as they've learned this season, they just don't usually get a 3rd minute or 4th or 5th.
Yeah, no, but you know, unfortunately for the team, I was talking about this with Bundy before you logged on here. The 3rd goal is the killer. I mean, I think, you know, this first goal is a power play goal. You know, it was a nice shot by Trouba with a good screen in front. Okay, fine. The second goal, I kind of thought Hart probably should make that save. But even if he doesn't, down 2-0 after the first period, it wasn't a good first period, but it wasn't a disastrous first period. They actually had some chances themselves. And then to come out and play the way that they did in the second period, you know, you sit there and say, well, they still have a chance in this game. But giving up that 3rd goal so early, was it 34 seconds into the second period? That's the one that I think is the goal. That's the difference. First of all, that's the difference in the game. And that's the goal that you cannot give up. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and defend losing 7 games in a row. You should never lose 7 straight games, right? There's obviously problems when you lose 7 games in a row. But usually when a team's losing like this, they look like complete and utter dog crap, right? At this juncture. It's like they don't care. They're disinterested. And I think Bundy, we were talking about this briefly, and I think he'll agree with me here. They played, they gave it a push. They gave it an effort. Outshot them, so was 16-5 in the second period. First half of that 3rd period, I mean, it was really pretty much rolling 2 lines to try and get that, you know, get within a goal. And then they just ran out of gas, I think, in the last 8 or 9 minutes of the period, and it just kind of was, you know, ugly from there. You lose Farabee, which is, you know, he's been your best goal scorer of late. He goes out with a shoulder injury in the first period. That's just yet another injury to this team. You know, it's hard to sit there and say, oh my God, what a disaster. But at the same time, I can understand why people get frustrated, because you've seen this play out like this before. And you wonder, you know, when does that change? And I think we'll have a conversation about that, about when that could change, if it will change at all. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, that this was kind of the type of effort that you wanted to see, but you wanted them to get the win here. Like the win here going into 3 days off would have been a lot better when you have 5 and 7 days next week. And it starts with back-to-back against Tampa and Colorado, who are going to just, you know, they're going to grind the hell out of the Flyers, right? So like you really wanted to get the win here and not have to worry about trying to end a streak against one of those 2 teams. So, I mean, that's how I saw it. I thought that it was an okay effort. It could have been better, but it also could have been worse.
Bundy, you think it was an okay effort?
I mean, I thought that after about the middle of the second period, I thought I saw definitely a team that looked like they were more on even ground to the Rangers. But to be honest with you guys, like early in that first period, it looked like an NHL team playing a college team. It really did at times. I mean, they were wheeling that puck around the offensive zone. The Flyers were chasing it. The defense were getting turned around. And that's the kind of start. Like, you know, there's an adage in sports and pro sports, especially hockey. You know, just weather the first 10 minutes when you're on the road and things aren't going good. And they did a terrible job of that. They took a penalty. They ended up getting, you know, they were down. Either way, you like it. And here's, I think, where you get the fans, they get a little bit ticked off with what goes on, is that, yeah, they fought Anthony. And I know we're kind of sticking up for what, you know, the values that a player has, the competitiveness that he wants to show. But they were down 3-0. I agree with you. The 3rd goal just cannot happen. I mean, that's the second period, the beginning of the second period, after you know your coach has talked to you. Somebody else made a point tonight too about talking about, you know, like, when do the team leaders have a meeting? they've already had meetings. They've had meetings about having meetings.
Yes.
So no, I'm telling you, I've been there. So those closed door meetings have happened. And the worst thing that can happen to a team is when you have those closed door meetings and you still don't get the result. That is really where you feel like your feet are in quicksand and that your ship is really, really headed down some rocky and rough waters. So I think that's where the team is at. And I think, again, from the standpoint of the fans and people that are tuned into this team on a nightly basis, yeah, they made it interesting, but they really didn't on the scoreboard at all. It's a 4-1 win for New York. It was 3-1 for the better part of the game till the Flyers ended up getting one. So again, they were around the play after they were down 3-0 and 3-1, mustered up a good effort in the third, but like you said, ran out of gas. And quite frankly, by that time, the Rangers were playing possum with them anyway, with probably right now the best goaltender in the league. I think people could actually say that he's been just that good for that team this year. Yep. And the Rangers have, the Rangers played like a team that knows they have a goaltender playing that well as well. They gave up some chances also. The Flyers just are not capitalizing. We said 2 weeks ago, guys, this team can't score. They can't score. I mean, and that, even the general manager alluded to it the other day, scoring from the flank, is not a real true sniper that they have. So they have a myriad of problems that they're staring at right now. And, again, Hart made some outstanding stops tonight as well. But again, I don't blame him for the loss. I don't like the third goal, but I don't like the third goal more for the defensive play on that than maybe perhaps Hart. So there's, again, more problems. I know they're working hard to come out of it, but again, hard work only gets you so far, especially in the eyes of the people that are paying to watch you play and that tune in on a nightly basis.
And that's part of the fundamental issue, right? Because you look at the way they started this game and it kind of feeds into the narrative that has existed about this team for the better part of, 5 years at least, which is, they don't compete hard. Their captain is gutless. If you were a better captain, the team would come out with more jump. You wouldn't see these slow starts. Like, this is just part of what has become routine. Like, when this team gets off to a slow start, those are the first few things that are kind of bantered about, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's in Facebook groups. And it's just the reality. And you look at it and you want to applaud a player's effort. You want to applaud a guy who might be a bottom sixer who's working his ass off to stay in the lineup or to make a case to be in this lineup when players on this team get healthy. But at the end of the day, this kind of result has kind of become commonplace for this team. It's a result that has become commonplace with this leadership core. And, Paul Holmgren said on this show a few episodes ago, Jake Voracek is a guy that needed to go. He needed a change of scenery. He kind of soured on things here. All right, well, you got rid of one, but there's still a significant chunk of what has been perceived as the leadership group of this team. And you've gone through a number of coaches over the last 6 years, and you've gone through at least two regimes in terms of the front office. Like, at some point, the question really does have to be asked, and it has been asked many times when we solicited questions from the listeners and from our Twitter followers about, what concerns you the most? What are you most interested in? One of the top questions is, what do you do now with Claude Giroux? Because if this is what this team is going to look like, and he's in the final year of his deal and he has that no movement clause, do you explore trading Claude Giroux? Do you think that realistically he's going to come back at the end of this season? Do you think the Flyers should even bring him back at the end of the season? We talked about last week, this team cannot be in a situation where he's their best player. For the vast majority of the season, he has been their best player. At what point do you consider turning the page? Bundy, let me go to you first as the former player. Is there anything to it, or is this just a fan-constructed, maybe somewhat media-supported narrative that holds no validity? Where do you fall?
I don't want to say it doesn't. First of all, when we talk about a player, I've historically, when I've done the games, I never really talk about a player on an individual level or, a particular variant. I usually talk about the effort that was presented that night. I don't like to overall, generalize a player because, I've been there before, right? So, they're in the league for a reason. I just feel from a standpoint of what was best for the team, just for the team, right? For the organization, for the crest. I said this, and I've said it privately, and I've heard other people say it, that they probably should have moved on from him 4 or 5 years ago for max value for what you could have gotten. That was after the first 6 years as a captain. He's 10 years into his tenure right now. The problem is that I think I look at this point is, first of all, you don't need to sign him right now. You could trade him at the deadline. If he's that much in love with the city of Philadelphia and he has a no movement clause, then tell him you want to trade him at the deadline or a little bit before, get him on a team to get acclimated, give him a chance. Then if he wants to re-sign here and you think there's something at the end of the year that you would as an organization said, we could use him. We're going to give him another year after he went somewhere. I'm okay with that. But in terms of right now, like where this team is at, he has been a good player for this team. He's been an excellent, outstanding flyer, one of the best that has ever come through the organization. I don't think anyone would say that. He's been a very good regular season player. Problem is that he's not carried his teams deep into the playoffs. So everybody, whether you're a quarterback, your starting pitcher, the best player on a hockey team or basketball team, Joel Embiid is probably no different in a sense from the Sixers standpoint. Same with Bryce Harper, because they're the star guys that get the focal point. The problem is that Giroux has had that spotlight on him for so long. And I think from a standpoint, people are saying, where have we gone with it? Doesn't mean that he's the villain in this. It just means that they have not gone to the promised land with him as a captain. And to be quite honest and frank, guys, it's been a roller coaster. We've been in, we've been out, we've been in, we've been out. That's tough. And that's tough for the fans to absorb over a generation, a period of a generation of a franchise. So that's what they have. He's a great player. I don't know what his future lies, but I know there are people in the organization that want to re-sign him, want to give him a longer than a 1-year extension. I just don't know if that's in the best interest for him. And I just don't think at this point it's in the best interest of the younger guys on this team, guys that are ready to take a step or are waiting to take a step, because the captain, is he 32, 31, whatever it is now, is still taking a lot of the limelight away from those younger guys in their development. That's how I feel. That's just my opinion. Anthony, I don't know what you think, but that's where I feel about it.
I'm going to answer Russ's question in a slightly different manner than you did. I look at it and say, is it time right now? No. But if this team's still in this position they're in 20 games from now, then yes. Then yeah, it is time at that point. Like when you got to sit there and say, okay, the effort we made to reshape this team failed. I mean, if after 40 games, if after a halfway point of the season, you're 7th place in the Metro and you're 6 to 8 points out of a playoff spot or whatever it is, right? You're probably going to replace the coach too at that point, but or maybe have already done it prior to that. But now that's when trades start happening, right? Trades are rare in the NHL, especially with big name players in November and December. It just doesn't happen unless there's a real, Patrick Laine type situation where they had to get him out of Winnipeg, right? You really don't see them happen this early in the season. So if a player like Giroux is going to get traded, it's going to be closer to the deadline. Maybe in February, and then approaching. February is the Olympic break. Maybe right after the Olympics, and then approaching March. So yeah, if the team's in a bad way, then yeah, you failed in what you plan to do, and you go to Claude and you say, hey, listen, we could talk in the spring, or talk in the summer if you want to come back, and maybe we can make it work, but for now, if you really want this team to succeed and you do want to come back here, we need to get something for you. Let us trade you somewhere. Where would you like to go? Well, give us a couple options. Don't just say one place. Give us like 3 or 4 options, and we'll engage those teams in conversation, and let's see if we can get some assets in return. And then maybe in the summer, if you want to come back, then you can come back. We'll work it out. But I don't think you can, I never want to say trade them now, because everybody's frustrated and aggravated. They lost 7 in a row. And I say, you can't right now. Now is not the time. We've got to wait and see where the team is, as you're approaching the midway point of the season. I just think it's too early to go down that path. I just think I've seen it too many times where teams struggle early and then they find a way and they get it right and they get it going. And I've also seen it where you think they're going to get it going and then they fall apart and then they don't. I think last year's Flyers were a perfect example. Got off to a pretty decent start. And we sat there and said, oh, this is going to be a pretty good team. And then all of a sudden they collapsed and then they can never recover. We thought, oh, well, maybe they can get back to it like they were doing early. And then they never could. They never recovered. And it was a disaster, and they had to make the moves that they had to make. So I think that, you got to give it, you've got to let that develop. You got to let the storyline actually play out. and not cut it short. And that's all. I'm just someone who preaches patience and preaches, being objective about it and say, let's see where we are then. For whatever reason, a million variables can happen between now and then. Let's see what the deal is and then make a decision at that point.
See where I land on this. And I know you think that I'm the unreasonable one here, but if you've gotten this far into the season, right? And it seems like your team has been upended by the loss of one player. And Chuck Fletcher's comments really reflected what seems to be an underlying belief that Ryan Ellis is kind of the key to this whole thing. That Ryan Ellis being back in the lineup is going to make this team a more dangerous team in all situations. It's going to be the cohesive element that's going to help them break out of their defensive zone, yada, yada, yada. And for the love of God, hopefully stabilize whatever the hell Ivan Provorov has been. Fine. But when you've gone through such an overhaul in your roster in the offseason, and now it all seems to hinge on this one guy again, that's problematic to me. That's indicative of the moves that you made in the offseason that might have looked decent in the first 10 games weren't really as impactful as you thought they were, or weren't as impactful as they should have been, because losing one guy should not under any circumstances doom a team the way that Ryan Ellis's absence has. He is not a top 5 defenseman in this league. You can make the case he's not a top 10 defenseman in this league.
Can I stop
it should not fund it. No.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Can I stop you for a second? Because I don't necessarily think that this is about missing one guy. I think missing Ryan Ellis certainly has hurt, but I don't think that this is all about, Ryan Ellis comes back and it cures all ills. It's not. And I don't think anybody's trying to make us believe that. At the same time, this team has played, I believe, one of their 21 games with the 18 skaters that they thought that they were going to have in the lineup at the start of the season.
Everybody's like that though, Anthony.
Yeah, but I get it. And I think that's what Chuck was saying, Chris. But here's another thing. Okay. As of Monday, this coming Monday, of the Flyers' first 23 games, 14 will have been played against the top 10 teams in the NHL by points percentage. There's something to that. Russ, you can sit there and shake your head all you want and wave your hands all you want. Yes, you ultimately have to beat those teams. There's no question about it. I'm not going to sit here and try and say, well, that's who you have to beat to get to where you want to go. You certainly do have to beat them eventually. But the fact of the matter is that you want to play those teams when you're at your best. And if you don't have your best lineup and best group, this is what you are right now. And so that's why I was so frustrated with you when you put out the tweet and say, and everybody's on board with this. Well, we are what we are right now. Well, right now, yes, the Flyers are what they are right now. Right now, this is what they are. There's nothing wrong with that. They're an injured team that is struggling against really good competition. It's not a defense. It's not saying that okay, this is an excuse. This is not anything along those lines. It is an honest assessment of where they are. But you can't sit there and kill them until they're struggling like this against other teams as well. If they come out after this stretch, after Tuesday, I think they go 6 straight games against teams that are, not as good, or either right around 500 or below 500. If they're still struggling after that, then I sit there and say, okay, fine. But we knew that this stretch of 18 games was going to be brutal to begin with. And that was assuming that the team was healthy. When we started that conversation, we weren't expecting Ryan Ellis to be out 6 weeks. We weren't expecting, Kevin Hayes came back tonight. Still didn't quite look like himself. He said he felt the best he's been in 2 years. Didn't quite look like himself. You lose Farabee in the game tonight. They have other NHL players out of the lineup, but you're trotting, Nick Seeler out there still on that third pair, which is, the third pair is that you can't put that third pair out there against anybody because they're going to get killed.
There's a lot of third pairs like that, though. There's a lot of players in the league now, Anthony. There's extra teams. There's extra. Yeah. That's the other thing I get caught up in too, is the amount of players we have. Like, you look at players like, well, we can't get rid of that guy. Like, everyone plays GM, right?
Yeah.
And then you realize, like, geez, if you have a guy that you think's worth something, maybe you have a look at moving him. But the bottom line is there's just so many players now that would have been in the minors anyway because of expansion. So I'm not even sure sometimes what I'm looking at half the time in terms of talent level. So, you might have a guy that maybe doesn't look necessarily great to you every single night, but that's as effective as it's going to get in a league that's watered down. Yeah, and that's the truth. That's a fact.
And let's be fair about it. I mean, I know Cam York is out with a minor injury right now, but he's on his way back. But they made the decision at the beginning of the season that Nick Seeler was a better option to play in this lineup because remember he played the first games because Ristolainen was not in the lineup the first couple games. But Nick Seeler was a better option than your young prospect defenseman, either York or Zamula, right? So, I mean, there's got to be a reason for that because they don't think
it's just so that you weren't jostling the kid back and forth. They wanted when it was his moment to come up, that it was his moment to be up
and
here,
the same thing,
and that you weren't going to be shuttling him back and forth.
And the same thing with Morgan.
That's what that was.
And it's the same thing with Morgan Frost.
So I'm not saying I don't think that the determination was made that Nick Seeler is a better defenseman right now than Cam York. It was a simple
but it is, Russ, but that's what it is. Like in the moment, Nick Seeler at the NHL level is a better defenseman than Cam York at the NHL level. That's not to say Cam York's not ultimately the better player. Obviously, we all agree that this kid's probably going to be better than Nick Seeler, right? I mean, if we're going to make that comparison, okay? But the fact is that
certainly hope so.
Yeah, if not, that's a real bad draft choice. But I mean, if in that moment at the start of the 2021-22 season, and you needed a seventh defenseman who had to play because you're missing one of your top six, that Nick Seeler was a better option than Cam York. They made that decision and they believed it. And it's obviously been the case because he's been here all year. He's been here all season so far, right?
Yeah. Anthony is right about that. I can tell you right now, they're going to try to plug in. I mean, when you're searching for points, searching for anything, you're going to try to dress the best lineup that's available to you that night. So yeah, Seeler on the depth chart is higher up than Cam York. And again, I haven't seen enough of Cam York outside of the preseason games or even the game last year to really know much about him because I haven't been that in tune with the American League early in the season. But, again, that is an issue. I mean, listen, one defenseman, especially from where Provorov is at, I mean, he's made a difference, right? Like we've seen him with a good player with Niskanen. And so it gives you hope with a guy like Ellis coming back. But, again, I look at the whole signing of Ellis is probably, they're probably wondering like what was going on with him when they acquired him? Because, clearly, I mean, they gave up at the end of the day. They still gave up the second pick in the draft at one point. Nolan Patrick, whether he's got it still, we don't know. Probably, I don't think he's going to have a long, he's not piling up points or doing much out in Vegas, although he's been out of the lineup. So again, and Myers was a young defenseman, but Ellis, again, I don't know what that injury was at the time. It certainly looks like something that's lingered, right, guys? I mean, that certainly it happened in Nashville and come on, and the Flyers are on the hook for it. That's a major problem. And it does happen. You got to know exactly what you're getting and what you're going to be sitting on for the year. So again, there's some accountability for that. I feel bad for him. Guy makes a career change, and you come into another city and there's high expectations. And you just can't get healthy. It happens sometimes, but I don't know, guys, this is a really, really tough stretch for this team. The other thing too, Anthony, just looking at like teams that have gone through awful stretches this year, how many besides teams like Arizona or the other bottom dwellers have gone and lost 7 in a row, in a league where your top heavy teams really gobble up a lot of the wins. It's a 500 league basically in the win-loss column. And now the Flyers are sitting at 8 and 9, I believe, overall. So that's why the points now are just so critical early in the year. They're as important now as they are as you get into early April, you're battling for those last spots. And I'm just afraid if they get too far behind, even in this stretch, we have, as you said, there's 6 games they have coming up that you look at and go, yeah, they could be all right. They could lose 3 of those games also,
Yeah, right. And that would be a problem. And that would be a problem, right? I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Let's at least let them play against some bad teams. Let them play Arizona again and Montreal and Ottawa. I mean, that's who's coming up on the schedule. I mean, these are not good teams at all. Yeah. And so if they go out and shit the bed against those teams, yeah, then I'm on your side, guys. I jump ship. You know what I'm saying? I get there with you.
I can tell you what those teams are thinking. They're coming in going, hey, we're playing the Flyers tonight. You got a chance to get a win.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Believe me, that's what they're saying.
Yeah. Of course.
See, the issue that I have here, and is the notion that they're in the midst of this difficult stretch and that they're not at full strength, and that has to be the reason that they've gotten as bad of results as they have. Is you're a guy who likes to beat the drum about parity in the NHL, about a team just needs to get some hot goaltending and they can ride it all the way to the Stanley Cup final. And that's fine. And you can certainly make that argument. But then at the same time, a team that is missing their number one defenseman and is missing a center that they knew going into the season, they had time. They knew that there was a chance that Kevin Hayes wasn't going to be back and ready at the beginning of the season, that went in and rolled the dice on Derek Brassard in the role that he was going to have to be in. The decision was made that this is what this team was going to be. So again, I come back to it's just Ryan Ellis. So if that's the case, I don't think that you can make the argument consistently that parity exists in the league and then turn around and say, well, the Flyers had a tough schedule. Like, yes, there is truth. There are difficult opponents they went up against, but like there are times when bad teams win. There are times where mediocre teams
done it.
beat good teams.
They beat Edmonton and Edmonton. They beat Washington and Washington. They beat Carolina and Carolina. They've beaten these good teams too. It's not like they've gone 0 and whatever against them. We're just looking at this. We're looking at the last 7, right? You're looking at the last 7
because they've lost 7 straight because they haven't found a breakthrough in 7 games.
I get it, Russ. But what I'm saying is you're going to sit there and say that, well, they have to find a way to beat these good teams. Well, they have beaten them as well. They have beaten them as well, just not in the last 7 games.
Not in the last 7 games.
Okay,
we just throw out the last 7.
We're not throwing it out. We're not throwing it out.
Can I ever tell you guys a little story about a little miracle that happened in a village in Lake Placid almost 42 years ago?
Bundy, no, I'm serious. Think about your playing days. I mean, on the teams that were really good that you were on. You went through stretches in the season where you had a run of a couple of weeks, 3 weeks where you played like complete shit, right? And you still figured it out a way.
We had a trip canceled on us one year. We were supposed to go to New Orleans. And this is like really like when I was really in my Gong Show days. Like I was like, yes, we're going to New Orleans. They won't find me for 3 days. So anyway, it was like, so we ended up going on like a 12-game winless streak. This isn't like the Lindros era. So we come in one morning, there's a note on the wall from Roger. It says, due to the circumstances, we will not be traveling to New Orleans for our trip. Yeah. And you know what? Even I remember Clark came in down in the locker room. We were playing Dallas that night. We're going for it. That was 12 because I think we won the next night. And he came down and he lit up guys in that locker room, me included. Oh, God, it was unbelievable. So we went out that night, pure fear. We ended up tying Dallas 2-2. I think we broke out of it the next night. We still had a good run, like, whatever went on had a good seeding, but it's an awful feeling losing. Losing is like winning. When you feel like you're winning, you can win. It feels like you're never going to lose. But when you're losing, man, I'll tell you what, it's brutal because and the worst part, and you feel like you're never going to win a game again. The worst part the Flyers have going for them right now, guys, and I've been around this, is when your goal scorers aren't scoring. Oh, you want to talk about a miserable locker room. That's why my dad had me play D when I was a kid. He says, don't worry about that goal scoring stuff. It's overrated. So I used to go in, get ready to play an 82-game season in the NHL, and I never had to worry about scoring a single goal. It was beautiful. Just keep the pucks out of the net. But seriously, guys, those are pressure points in a year, for guys that have expectations, like Atkinson squeezing the stick right, a Konechny. That's lifeblood for guys, goal scoring. Like, when it's not happening, it's brutal.
See, you mentioned that team, right? That team had legitimate expectations, had legitimate talent, had a chance to contend, right?
Yeah.
So like going into a stretch and even coming out of a stretch, we have the ability, we have the talent. It's all there for us. This team isn't that, right? Like, do either of you believe right now that this team, if healthy, is a Stanley Cup contender? Do you believe that this team is a top 2 team in the Met? This team is a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference if they're healthy, because I don't see it. And even in the first 10 games where results were okay, there were indications that there was a decent bit of luck. There was a lot of hot goaltending, and there was an unsustainable goal scoring streak that this team had in that stretch. And it's come crashing back down to earth. So like, I get what you're saying, and I totally understand it, but I don't think this is apples to apples, because that team you're talking about had the elite talent.
And that almost makes it harder, though, Russ. Right?
Yeah, and we couldn't win a game for 12 games. So there's a little bit of credit. It's a different league, guys. Like, I mean, it really is. It's a totally different animal. I mean, you're going out. Every team was different when you played. You might have had a goon team you were playing one night. You might have had a skill team, dump and chase the next night. Like every team had a different personality then. So you just never knew you're going up against. It feels like a lot of ways, like top echelon teams, they're all kind of the same. It's a very vanilla type of way you go about playing the hockey games now. And that's because of the lack of physicality. I mean, in the third period tonight, I think it was 16-10 hits for the Rangers at some point in the middle of the third. But that's what happened. So you get a different dynamic of the hockey game. That's why that time was different, Russ. But yeah, that was a team that if you looked at the time, people would consider it a Stanley Cup contender. I don't think anybody right now is considering this team as it's formed right now a Stanley Cup contender, whether they're healthy or not. I think you can, like Anthony said, you hope you go on a run and things go good and your goaltending becomes very much a part of it. But I mean, you'd be a fool to come out here and say this team is a Stanley Cup contender as it's set up right now, healthy or not.
Now, it's interesting. I will say this, is I was a little surprised that Vigneault, I don't know if you guys saw, after the game and he was interviewed tonight, what he said about the team. And I'm gonna scroll back here and find the actual quote because it was it's kind of surprising. He says, "I'm not satisfied about anything." I guess the question was, you got to be satisfied with at least the effort was, probably there. He says, "I'm not satisfied about anything. This is serious here. We're not finishing. We're executing. We'll have to find ways to win 1-0 or 2-1. Tighten up defensively. Some plays our guys have made in the past and have the talent to make. They're just not making." Now that is a little bit concerning to me. And I think that ties into what you were saying earlier, Bundy, that almost that if it does, they would almost have to play a perfect game in order to win if your top guys aren't scoring goals. And I think that that's what he's referring to.
Well, and how are they going to win a 1-0 game? I mean, honestly, they're not going to win. They can't win a 1-0 game right now the way they're playing. I mean, they can't. They give up too many chances unless their goaltender stands on their head. But yeah, you're right. That's the biggest cliche in hockey. Boys, when you're down and out, let's go win a 1-0 game. And that's or let's back in the day say, you know what, let's go tie a game 1-1. Like that's how the mindset. Just keep the game tight, keep it low scoring, give yourself a chance. It sounds like he's a frustrated coach right? Because,
yeah, I mean,
no, he's absolutely frustrated. There's no doubt about it. Yeah,
it would be one thing if your defensive core were healthy and you were getting the goaltending that you've gotten for the vast majority of the season from Carter Hart and Martin Jones. Like, here's the worst part. If you had gotten this goaltending last year's a totally different situation, right? Like you actually have a legitimate team last year. You had a chance to do something at least decent. You have a chance to make a decent enough playoff run. You had horrible goaltending last year. This year, it's getting squandered. And to your point, you can't win a 1-0 game because the guys playing in front of him aren't getting that job done. You don't have the defensive capability to hold teams to one goal or to a shutout, no matter how well your goaltender's playing. And
is there a question in there?
I just wanted to see if you had thoughts. Like, do you?
No, I that's why I said I was a little perplexed by him saying that because they're not going to win games 1-0 and 2-1. They're just not. I mean, you might be able to get away with it like a game here or there, kind of, depending on if you're playing another team, like Montreal's coming up on the schedule. The Canadians are the worst offensive team in hockey. They average 2 goals a game, right? On average. So maybe you look at that game and go in there and say, all right, boys, we can win this one 2-1. Okay, maybe. Yeah, okay, fine. But you can't, you're going to play Tampa on Sunday and Colorado on Monday. You're going to beat those teams 1-0, 2-1? No shot, no prayer. So that's why I was a little surprised that AV came out and said that publicly. And maybe it's just him letting off he's finally letting out his frustration with the fact that guys aren't scoring goals. And that's okay. I mean, maybe it's good that the coach lets out a little steam publicly.
Is it though? But really though, is it? Because it's a day after the GM threw the players under the bus, especially on the power play. So now you have the GM who came out and said this week
how they responded. Look how the power play responded though.
Well, the GM came out and said, this is a really important week. They came out. We said the first period and a half, the effort wasn't there. The execution was poor, right? And then they kind of turned it around. The thing that really was, if you want to go to the power play, because the power play was bad for stretches, the power play tonight was good during that 5-minute major. Like that was the thing that maybe you started to feel like, wow, where's this been? Because you were seeing a variety of shots from a variety of different spots on the ice. You were seeing a team that maybe had a little bit of desperation, but wasn't gripping the stick too tightly. They weren't overthinking the game. They were letting the power play come to them, which is something they haven't done all year. But man, if it takes your GM the day before, and now your head coach is saying this stuff, to me, like that's problematic on a number of levels. Maybe the worst part of this is this team. Again, we come back to, they're missing one guy right now. This team,
you come back to this.
The players,
I don't keep going back to this.
Well, listen, because the players who were acquired in the offseason were at whose behest, Anthony? Who's the guy who went in with the shopping list and said, these are the kinds of players?
The entire coaching staff did. Yeah.
And who's the one who went out and executed the moves?
And the general manager, yeah.
The general manager did. So the two guys who have expressed the most frustration in 2 days are the ones who went shopping for the groceries and brought them in. And now they're pissed off that the line cooks can't execute. Like, I don't know what we're doing here. That to me is the ultimate frustration. It's like, I get it. You can be upset that like your grand vision of what this team should be or could be, or how they were going to execute and win games isn't working. But like, man, you're a quarter of the way through the season now. It's kind of a problem. And if you have to go public now in back-to-back days to try to light a fire under this team, that to me is another problem. Right.
Well,
and it's
not. And that's a problem with your generation. Everybody's too soft in your generation. Your generation and younger. Oh my God, they're going to call me. They're going to say I stink publicly. Oh, how am I going to react? Oh, back in the day, the coach would come out and just say, so-and-so suck. The coach would call the media up and say, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you who sucks. Write who sucks in the paper. And then they would put it in there. Right. And that would be it. And then I'd show up and have Bundy yelling at me for giving him a bad grade because Hitch told me to give him a bad grade on the midseason report card. Right. I mean, but that's kind of stuff.
That's how it works, huh? You know what? I'll give Hitch my report card too.
but like seriously, like that's
started.
But I mean, that's the thing. No, it's like, why can't you? You're making multi-million
dollars. No. Whoa. Don't conflate. Whoa. Don't mix this up. I have no problem conceptually with a coach going public saying they're unhappy, or the GM going out and saying they're unhappy. My problem is this is now a systemic issue that happens year over year. And this comes back to, is it the core? Is it an issue with the team itself? Because when you have coach, GM, different coach, different GM, and we keep coming back to like the same idea time and time again, like to me, that's a concerning thing. I don't care. Coach can go out and flame the players all he wants. GM can go out and flame the players all he wants. I'm saying I think it's an issue that
45% of the roster was turned over, Russ. Like it's the generation of athlete. It's not to sit there and say, oh, well, you know, it's the same people. It's 45% of the roster was turned over and you're having the same problem. Well, then it's a problem with the generation of athlete. And you can have this argument about any sport. You could have it in basketball. For basketball, by God, it's the worst in basketball, far worse than hockey, right? And it's pretty bad in football too. And baseball's got its divas as well. I mean, I just think it's an issue.
In girls basketball, Anthony.
Yeah, you're right.
That's right.
Bundy. You're right about that, Bundy. You're absolutely
girls basketball,
100%.
girls soccer. That's why when you're a coach, you'd rather coach the girls because they play more fundamentally sound and the egos aren't there as much.
Correct. Well played. You're 100% right. It's all the guys. It really is. Yep. But I mean, I really do think it's an issue. I really do think I don't have a problem with a coach coming out and calling his team out. I think it's good. It's good. They need to hear it sometimes. They need to hear it because they're coddled too much. You know, the coach falls on the sword all the time in sports, or the coach sits there and says, well, you know, this is a group effort and doesn't point out individuals. You know what? When you start pointing out the individuals, that's what Bundy's told the story how many times about getting benched and then how it changed his career. Right. I mean, and that's a public thing. You got pulled out of the lineup because you were sucking. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like, shit, I better get myself together. And if I want to stay in this league, and you did, you know, and that was good on you. I think players need that more now. And then, you know, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and say it.
We're not disagreeing about
societal. We could save the societal talk for another one. We could actually put a whole episode towards it, and I'd be happy to chime in. But you're right. It's a different time. It's a different time in pro sports. It's a different time in life. But yeah, personalities are different. I mean, I remember getting called up as a kid, like, you know, or Turk Evers would come up and go, hey, Clarkie wants to see you up at his office. I'm like, first time, I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of neat. I wonder what this is all about. Oh, my God. I can't even begin to start. I mean, I don't like to use the throwing the F-bombs out here no matter what, because kids are listening, but holy Jesus, man. I'll tell you what, I can hardly drive my car home that night. We had a game the next night. I mean, he said stuff to you now that would actually probably have some guys laying on a couch somewhere, like talking it out. But I had to go home and suck it up and get ready to play the next night because I felt like the end of the world was coming if I didn't somehow go out and play a good game. That's accountability. I don't know. Maybe that's why our generation's so much different. But, I went through that a lot,
It's interesting. What's his name? Who was the interim coach, Russ?
Scott Gordon.
Yeah. Scott Gordon had a real good conversation with Russ and I about this, Bundy. And I think that he was on to something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. Maybe this is the one way to bridge the gap between our generation and the younger generation. And Scott Gordon said, to Russ and I, says, you could be hard on guys, but you just have to explain to them why you're being hard on them. This generation wants to know. They want to know why. They want you to explain it and give this whole detailed thing. And whereas before a coach or a general manager would just fly off the handle, dropping 36 F-bombs and calling you every name under the sun, and you just will go home and be like, all right, I got to be better. Maybe they didn't exactly tell you why you have to be better, but you just knew that you had to be better. Now the generation's like, okay, yell at me, go ahead, fine, but tell me what you want me to do different. What do I have to do differently? And maybe that's the disconnect between an older coaching staff right now with guys like Vigneault and Tarian, who've been around forever. And Mike Yo's been around a while now too, I guess. And the younger generation of player. Not to say that it's a young team per se, but a younger generation of player. And maybe that's the disconnect. I don't know.
You can find players that will be willing to accept that kind of coaching. Like, I mean, I know Chief, right? Berube.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy's not going to be out there passing around high fives. I mean, he's going to let you know straight up, I need you to be better. And here's why you need to be better. And if you're not better, you're not going to play.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no like kind of, mixed messages. He took a team in last place in January. That's where we all want to lay our hope. And he won a Stanley Cup. He had a good goaltending. He had a core group of guys that bought in, and he was able to get that message out. So it can happen. It's just, and I agree with what Gordo says like that. I have kids all around 20. My daughters are, and they've been in Division I college basketball players. But they, it is different. I say that about girls because I was talking about the basketball, but they don't take anything for granted. They go out every single day and work hard and practice in the games, and that's what I expect from them because that's the way I was taught. So I think of it like that too. I think there's a lot of entitlement guys that come in too with sports now. There's guys come in now and they've already made the team. Where guys used to have to earn it, no matter, even if you knew you were going to make the team, you still had the perception that you had to go earn that job. So a lot of things have changed, but again, to me, at the end of the day, guys, it still comes down to attitude, effort, and accountability. Those things like that. When you're out there as a member of a team, you can keep yourself and have pride in your game and be able to go out and execute to some degree. They're in a bad funk right now, and they somehow need to find a way to come out of it. I thought that McEwen fight the other night would really kind of bring everything to life, and it just didn't materialize. It's interesting what can happen in a game to bring life to a team.
And you mentioned the accountability piece, and I guess that's what I keep coming back around to. Like if we circle back even to the beginning of this episode, you'd mentioned that somebody had tweeted at us about, when's the closed door meeting going to happen? When are guys pounding on tables, that kind of thing. And you said like those kind of meetings have already happened. At this point, when you're in this kind of a funk, like those things have happened. All right. So if we know that part's done, if we know that the leadership core has gone out of their way to hold these kinds of meetings, we know that the coach has probably been addressing things behind closed doors. The GM might have gone down and addressed things behind closed doors, although he kind of waffled on that one in his press conference. The GM's now come out publicly. The coaches come out publicly. Are we at a point now where over the next 10 games that Anthony wants to see, we're going to see which scenarios playing out? It's either these guys have an accountability issue or there's just a talent deficiency on this team. Like if we feel like the team is going out almost every night and giving their best effort and yet the results aren't happening, is it just a situation where this team isn't nearly as good as the coach and the GM thought it was when they built it?
Yeah, could well be. Could well be, Russ. I mean, and you say the next 10 games, and the next 10 games get you to Christmas. Yeah. And that's what I think that we all kind of agreed at the beginning of the year that if the team was in a bad spot come the holidays, then we could see change. So I think we need to give them that time, and I get it. I understand if you're a fan, I understand the frustration of a 7-game losing streak. I understand the frustration that the team can't freaking score. Second worst offensive scoring team in the NHL in the month of November. I get it, right? It's there. We're all seeing it. We're all witnessing it. It's not great. But I also say that you can't just look at just those 7 games in a vacuum and say that's the team. You got to give them an opportunity to come out of it. And they may not come out of it. And then they're worse than what we are, right? They're worse than that. They're worse than what he said in the press conference. So, but I think you got to give them that time. And I think it's only fair. And I think, if I asked you, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about this, Bundy, because I know we're getting ready to wrap the episode up. But if you go back to your playing days, and I want you to think back to that 12-game losing streak and imagine, 7 games into that or 8 games into that, I came up to you in the locker room and I said, wow, man, things are really not going well. Do you think you guys need to just kind of blow this up at this point? Does there need to be major change with this roster or with this team? Like, how would you have responded as a player in that moment, right? Yeah, I mean,
and again, you know what I say? It felt like we were never going to win. The only difference was with that is that we had some ties in there, and right. Believe me, every single tie at that time felt like a win. So it was like, right on, boys, good tie tonight, and so again, we live like that, but that was a team though. I think that even though it was going on, like at the end, if we said, guys, let's go try to win a 1-0 game, that was actually a team that probably could have went out and actually accomplished that. Yeah. That was a much better team built team. That was a team coming off a Stanley Cup final. I guess that year. So.
I guess the question I'm asking is more as a player who's kind of in that bunker, with the team losing right now, right? I mean, your mentality is not, let's screw it. We'll throw our hands up and blow it up 21 games into a season, right? Your mentality is, let's freaking figure this out and find a way to win.
And the one thing I'd like to see though, and I know we are wrapping up because it could open up a whole new can with this. I'd love to see more friggin' come after a team at the start of a game. Don't wade your way into that. Is a one thing and it's always usually a dictated leadership group that comes from. I want to see a team come out gangbusters, man, hungry, pissed off. You're allowed to be like that. Don't wait for the game to set itself up. You set the tone. Come out and go rock somebody. And if you get a penalty for it, we'll kill it for you. You don't want to take a dumb one, but if it's an effort penalty because you want to try to get the building going, that's part of what Flyer hockey's been. We don't see a lot of that anywhere in the league anymore, but I'd love to see a better start. Give themselves a fighting chance. At least create that energy early. That's something we don't see enough of, Anthony and Russ, and we have not seen it for quite some time, to be honest with you, especially at home. Had a good home record, I think, was it last year, the year before? Excellent home record. Right. But they have to have better starts.
You're right about that. All right, Russ, I know we want to wrap it up. I know we have, 3 new.
You guys want to wrap it up. I'm ready to go 2 more hours on the Only Flyers podcast. The people. Dude,
we got to get up. We got to wake up early.
Oh, here he goes. Pobrecito. All right, we do have some new 5-star reviews. We love 5-star reviews. They make everybody smile. They make Ant smile. They make Bundy smile. They warm the cockles of my heart. Let's start off with Renberg. Renberg leaves a 5-star review for us. Hockey Knowledge. Fantastic podcast with 3 knowledgeable hockey guys with the lack of coverage by 2 local sports radio stations. This is a great listen. Thanks, Renberg.
Although I don't know about if he's right about 3 knowledgeable hockey guys, maybe just 2, but that's all right.
You're right. I mean, hey, listen, I don't want you to put yourself down like that. I know. Listen, Bundy and I, we carry the load, but we try. The next one is from Funky Fresh. I like this. Funky Fresh. If I could, I'd give more stars. I only first came across this brilliant podcast over the summer, so I haven't been listening long. Now, with the addition of the man of the people, Chris Tarian, this podcast is a can't miss. Unlike other Flyers podcasts that try to sugarcoat everything, Anthony, Russ, and Chris tell it how it is and supply Flyers fans the behind-the-scenes knowledge we deserve. The Flyers are a tire fire, but at least we have these 3 hosts to guide us and navigate us through the tough times, Flyers fans. Dave Scott out. Interesting.
Thanks, Funky Fresh.
Funky Fresh, right? Funky Fresh.
Yeah, Funky Fresh. He actually signed
Funky
it Nick,
Fresh.
so I think that's his first name, Nick.
Beautiful.
Nah.
Great stuff.
Funky Fresh Nick. All right. And then last one from Bits of Tid. 5 stars. The best, Jerry. The best. Hands down, the best Flyers pod. Anthony, Russ, and Bundy give the listeners a good mix of perspectives from insiders such as journalists and player to generational Gen Xers or to whatever Russ is. Some of their rabbit hole conversations are entertaining too. See, Thanksgiving, one must go. Keep up the great work. I look forward to each and every episode. Thank you, Bits of Tid.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff.
Great
That's
stuff.
what we're here for.
Yeah.
You know? Listen,
So,
we
yeah.
love the 5-star reviews. Make sure you go over to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. We're loving it. We're loving the reviews as they come in. Of course, you can leave a 5-star rating. We love the ratings, but the reviews are what we read here on the show. Remember, it has to be 5 stars. Whether you love us or hate us, leave it 5 stars and we'll read it. You want to burn us? You want to light one of us on fire? Leave a 5-star review. We'll still read it because that's what we do here. But you leave a 3-star review or a 1 or a 2 or even a 4. It doesn't get read, homie. That's not how this works. So we will be back next week with a new episode unless there's something that happens between now and then. I don't think there will be, but I mean, who knows? We are what we are after all. So make sure you
Well
go
played,
follow
Russ. Well played.
Go follow Bundy over on Twitter at CTerrian6. Follow Anthony on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. You can follow me on Twitter if you so choose at JoyOnBroad. Of course, all of our Twitter handles. Everything you need is in the description of this episode, as well as the different places you can find this podcast and the links there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. And of course, as we mentioned at the top of the show, video versions of the episode, they usually come out a day or two after the audio version. But if you want to sit back and you want to watch Bundy smile, by all means, you can over on youtube.com/crossingbroad. You can find all the written content about this team, including recaps, any big news moments. You can find that over on crossingbroad.com. And hell, you can even read Anthony's betting previews. Anthony, I didn't get into this. I don't remember how your picks did today, but you have been doing a good job for the most part for the Penguins and the Flyers betting previews. So kudos to you, fella.
I had Panarin scoring a goal for the Rangers and a win tonight.
That's a cheap win. Empty netter. It's cheap, but baby,
it's a cheap win. We'll take it.
Russ, They don't ask how, buddy. They ask how many.
And I liked the under. I liked the under 5.5, and it covered. So the other bets did not do as well. I was 2-2.
There you go. All right. So on that bombshell, it is time to end. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week here on Snow the Goalie.